Hello, my crafty friends. It's Michelle, the Southern Shell, and I'm here to share with you another project that I created. Look at these adorable mittens that I made for ornaments. I used the decoupaging method with some papers and some fabric that I had on hand. The papers I just printed out on regular copy paper. It was super simple. I used the 3¼ inch mittens, some Waverly chalk paint, some wool, and fabric and Mod Podge. And I'm going to show you what I did to get started on this. Oh, I also used some moss and some cinnamon sticks. That was part of the embellishments that I used, and some bells and some wood stars and just some different things that I used for embellishments. I did not put on the front here. This is the stuff you will need to make your basic ornament. All right, now let's go ahead and get creating. Here are some images I've had. I have gotten some of these off of Etsy, and I've gotten some of these off of creativefabrica.com. Now that is a wonderful little site where you can get some free images to download, or you can pay, I think it's almost $50 a year and have all the downloads you want. And they have so many different things, not just images. Just beautiful, great deal. That's only $3.99 a month. Perfect. And these mittens, I believe these are, oh my goodness, I probably got those off of Amazon. It could have been Dollar Tree. I'm trying to use my stash, so this is a lot of stuff that's been in my stash. I wanted the mittens facing a different direction, so I'm going to show you how I went ahead and fixed that. Once again, I just use regular copy paper. Now when I do my journaling, I use a heavy copy paper, a heavy paper, not a cardstock, and it's really great. But for this one, I really wanted to be able to decoupage with it, and so I went ahead and used the lighter copy paper. Here I'm just taking my hot glue. I know I have some wood filler somewhere, but we moved this year and I don't know where half my stuff is. So I just added some hot glue in there, and I'm just going to come right on over and give this a paint right over the hot glue. And that's going to help just fill that in and not have to worry about those holes in there. I know that sounds silly, but it worked just fine. Because we're going to go ahead and Mod Podge over that, you're not going to see those holes, and they're going to be sealed in. I went ahead and used my heat gun there and helped that paint dry. And I'm just coming back in with some 120 grit sandpaper, and I'm making sure that that hot glue is smooth across there, so when I do lay my paper down to Mod Podge it on, you're not going to have a lump where the glue was. Guys, I'm a messy crafter. It's just the way I am. I just love to get into my work. When I went downstairs after doing this, my husband told me I had paint on my face. I did not have it on my pajamas. It was early in the morning doing this. I didn't have any on my pajamas, but I had it on my face. Go figure. Okay, so once those were painted and partially dry, I went ahead and just set them on the clean side of the parchment paper and set them aside. I do have my Mod Podge out here. I buy it in the large containers, and I stick it in my mason jar because it's easier for me to open and close. You know, I have hand issues, and so I definitely want something that's going to be a little easier to open. Now that the paint is dry on these mittens, I'm just loading a layer of this Mod Podge on there, and I'm just leaving them there so they can dry. I'm using one of my extra mittens here, and I'm just setting it over my paper, and I am just going to use a paintbrush with some water to go over the edge of that copy paper. Now, because it's not tissue paper or it's not rice paper, it did need a little bit of help, and that's why I used the water. And then I just came in with my craft knife right here, and I grabbed and pulled. I did not cut with the craft knife. I grabbed and pulled, and it actually feathered that paper nicely, so I can actually use it, and it's going to blend in nice to the mitten when I get it on there. Now, I used the blank mitten to kind of give me an idea to make sure that I'm within the realms of that mitten so that I know just what I have to play with. And so when I find that out, now I can look at my image and decide just how close I want to come in to my image before I place it on my mitten. Now guys, I do have rice paper and I have tissue paper I could have printed on. I wanted to try to give you something that most people have around the house. You can use this with your regular paper, and that's why I did it this way. If you don't have Mod Podge, you can use white school glue and mix it with some water. You don't have a mitten, you can get these little Dollar Tree wooden ornaments that you can use in place of the mittens or anything like that. So now I can just see just how it's going to fit on there, and I think it's going to be great. So I went ahead and I did that with all of my other papers, and I got them all ready to go on the mittens. Now I'm just using the mitten blank once again, and I'm going to use it to trace out the mitten on the back side of the fabric that I chose. Now looking at the mittens above, I have got them all going the same direction except one. So you need to make sure that when you're cutting these out or tracing them, that you're doing it so that they will all fit appropriately on the opposite side of your mitten, because the side that we painted is where you're going to decoupage the image onto. The back side is where we're going to decoupage the fabric onto. So when you're cutting these, you want to make sure that they're in the same direction as the front side, so that when you lay it down with the right side out, that mitten will sit right on top and it'll be able to cover the other side properly. Alrighty, that Mod Podge is dry and I am ready to get started on these images. And I'm just looking to see just which one's going to fit properly on that mitten that's facing the opposite direction. And so I think that that one in the upper right hand corner is going to be perfect. Now I'm using the hot iron method. I just got this little iron off of Amazon several years ago. It has one heat setting, which is perfect for what we need. Now the issue I had here is when you're using the dry iron, the hot iron, you want your image to cover that whole section, not just one area. And so I did have an issue with my parchment paper sticking to the Mod Podge. It wanted to seal it against there as well. But because it's parchment paper, it did come off and I didn't have any issues. So that worked out fine. So now I wanted to go ahead and sand the edges. Now, normally if I used my tissue paper or my rice paper or Mod Podge paper, this would come off just simply right first, fast, all done. But because it is copy paper, I did need to wet just the edge. I went ahead and used my paintbrush and some water, wet that edge, and then came right in with that 120 grit sandpaper, and it just sanded off nicely. The only problem area was right up in where that thumb came out on that mitten. Now guys, when I make mistakes, boo-boos, I will leave it in my film so that you can see just what not to do. Like me putting the Mod Podge all over that mitten and then trying to iron it down. Learn from me. That's what I want to do with you, is be able to show you what I did, and even if it messed up, you know now what not to do. That's just who I am. I'm a fly by the seat of my pants kind of crafter. I'm an author as well, and that's how I write. And I tell you, I enjoy it, and sometimes you just got to go with it. I would not recommend using your iron on wet Mod Podge and fabric. Now, yes, I did it a couple times on here, and I'm like, what are you doing? This is not dry Mod Podge. This is wet Mod Podge. This is not going to work for you. And so I did stop doing it, and I just used the Mod Podge as the way it was intended to be used. And I didn't want to ruin my iron, because with that wet Mod Podge, look at there, with that wet Mod Podge, it would come and it would get on your iron, and that can ruin your iron. And so I ended up sticking that piece of parchment paper down again and using it there. But honestly, guys, lay it down, let it dry. If you want to iron it afterwards, by all means, you can do that. But don't try to iron it in the middle of making it like I did. It just doesn't make any sense. and, just learn from me. If it worked for you, let me know in the comments below how you do when you are Mod Podging fabric. Fabric, I don't know. I haven't used fabric a lot in decoupaging, but I've used it a couple times. It's been a while since I've actually Mod Podged with it. So I'm wondering if I even have a video out where I've done it before. I don't remember. I'll look, but definitely follow the instructions and don't go by the seat of your pants like I was doing here. So once I got those all done, I just set them aside to dry. When they were dry, I flipped them on over and I got out some Waverly chalk paint and some acrylic paints in some different colors. I tried to pull out colors that were also in the image there. So I used some moss green, I used some crimson, and I used some snow white and plaster. And so I did those colors because that was the colors that kind of matched the images in that dress and the ground coverings there with the pine. I didn't want it to be too dark, but I knew that I could use these colors to kind of mix and blend that so it doesn't look like she's just sitting in air there. So I went ahead and I started with the moss green. I painted the edges of that mitten along the bottom, but I'm also bringing that in to the inside edge of the front of that ornament. I'm using the different colors there and I'm blending them so we have different colors, different shades of the green, different shades of the white and the beige, well, the plaster, and I'm just using those to layer what I wanted there. Now I brought in that chocolate sprinkle, and I use that because of the real dark areas around her feet and around the end of her dress, like where the pine cones and everything are sitting. I wanted to be able to have a foundation down at the bottom that's going to kind of tie this all together. Because this was on copy paper, I didn't want that line to show. That is one thing about using tissue paper or even your Mod Podge paper and your rice paper. The copy paper will have a more distinct edge on it. Even though I feathered it, you can actually see it's a little thicker than all of those, so it does stand up a bit more. So what I did is I took my colors and I layered all the way around, tapping in to the side of that paper with the different colors and blending them so that it would help give us a more cohesive blend from the mitten into the image. And of course, around the top, I know where my wool is going to go in a little bit, and so I used just the white around there to help blend that into the white mitten. I'm going to continue around the edges here so that the edge of the mitten will have a clean look and not just look messy where the other paints have touched up. So I just wanted it to have that dark brown going into that green, and I set it aside. Now all of these have been done, and I'm just hitting them with my heat gun so that I can start putting the wool on. You can see across the top I didn't do anything on those papers. You can see that distinctive line there, but I'm going to be covering that with wool. I need to think about putting hangers on these, so I took my jute twine, I cut them at 10 inches, I tied a knot at each end of these, and then I hot glued them down to each side of the ornament just above the mitten thumb. Once I get those hot glued on there with the knot, I know that knot is going to help grab and hold, especially once I get that cotton, wool, artificial, whatever, glued on here around the top. You use what you want. You do you, boo. Use what we have. So I have this. It's not the best quality and it's messy, but I took it and I separated a piece that I knew would fit around the top of that. I hot glued it over that piece of the hanger. I twisted it around the corner because otherwise this could really get messy. Twisted it around the corner and then pulled it, opened it a little bit more and pulled it around the front, came to the other end, glued it down, pulled it over to the other end, And then I'm going to twist it again to pull it around the other side. This way, those fibers are glued down on one side of the mitten and the opposite fibers are glued on the other side of the mitten. This should hold it into place nicely. Now, it didn't quite wrap around all the way, so I went ahead and took another small piece, put it there, glued it down in the center. Now, you're going to be able to see it, and I don't care because there's something that's going to go right there. One of my embellishments is going to go right over that centerpiece, and so I don't need a bunch of that fur piece there to cover it. I don't even know what to call this. It's not necessarily fur, or I don't know. Anyway, that embellishment, there we go. I'm trimming around the edges, and I want it to, I don't want it to look like straight cut. So I wanted to make sure that, the top looked nice too. So I'm going to go ahead and lay it on down, and I had twisted it at the bottom, and I'm going to hot glue a strip across the top, lay it on down, and then we're going to glue it across the bottom. Once I get that glued down, I'm actually going to take it and pinch them together so that it becomes one complete piece, and you don't see that it's a couple different pieces across that top. If you can do that and squeeze it on in there, it actually makes it look more like a whole piece wrapped around that mitten top. Now here I'm just going to be adding some hot glue here and there. I'll be doing a little bit of trimming here and there. And then I'm just going to push down these fibers so that they look seamless, that they're not going to look like they've been pieced together too much. I wanted to go ahead and, you'll see me grabbing the edges here, trimming it up a little bit, and then hot gluing it down just so that it blends right on in and doesn't look like it's just been pieced on there. So I actually saved this one for last, thinking that I would have the process down properly by the time I got to the last one to film it. Nope, the other three were so much easier to do. So I have a bronze bell and 2 wooden snowflakes. I threaded the bell and stuck it on up and threaded it onto the button. I tied a knot and I glued that on down to the bell. Then I threaded the other bell on there and tied the elastic band here a little looser so that it had some room, like an inch and like a half inch to an inch between the bell snowflake and this snowflake. And then I tied it off, and once again I used some glue on there. And then I went ahead and I attached it to the corner of those fibers by just using some hot glue. With the cording on there and that wooden button, gluing it into those fibers with the hot glue is going to be just fine. So on the opposite side, I'm using that large snowflake brad fastener, hot glued the pieces that were open, and then pushed it on down into those fibers. So let's start with some moss on the bottom. I want this to look like the fairy garden. I just took some of that green moss and I'm just cutting it up real fine because it was a little bigger than I wanted for the bottom of this mitten. I used some Fabri-Tac all the way across that bottom where I wanted it to be and just rolled it into that cut up moss. Look at how perfectly that's set on there. So I'm going to do it again with all of these, and then I'm also going to just make sure and dust off any of the moss that did not grab or hold on properly. So because I used the Fabri-Tac, I'm able to go ahead and squish it right on into that glue because it does take about a minute for that glue to totally set. And I can just squish it on in there and just know that it's grabbed properly. So on the back side, you can see the moss down there at the bottom of the mitten. Look at how that is just so foresty. I just love it. So I'm taking some cinnamon sticks here and I'm cutting them up to look like little pieces of log. And I am going to use the Fabri-Tac, or is it hot glue? I think I used hot glue to put these onto the fabric, which is going to be just perfect. And I'm just going to lay the bigger pieces down on each of those mittens. Yeah, I use hot glue here. So I'm just going to lay that on down. and hot glue that so it's going right into that moss. And then I'm going to take some of the smaller pieces and build it up around so it looks like there were pieces in there of maybe fallen trees, old logs, an old fire pit, whatever you want to think of to put in there. And then I'm going to come back in around that once I've got those down there, and I'm actually going to glue some more moss around those pieces. Now, before I added the moss around the log pieces, I pulled out some stamens, some red stamens. That's what you use when you're creating some artificial flowers. And I'm putting 3 each on these mittens. And I'm going to just kind of put 3 of those together, give them a little twist, and take that wire and tuck it on down into the open end of that cinnamon stick. You can see here I'm just using my pliers just to bend it around, hot glue that, and that's going to slide right on in to that open piece of cinnamon stick. And now I can adjust those stamens any way I want and just make it look like it's just some berries or something growing out of that log. Now, once again, I'm going to I took one and folded it in half because they have a stamen on each end. And then I took the other stamen and cut it in half. So that gave me enough to put 3 on each mitten. Once again, twist it around, find where you want it, stick it into one of those holes, and just adjust what you want. Now I'm going to come back in with my Fabri-Tac, and I'm going to just put some of that leftover moss right on top of those logs. And I'm going to come back in a minute and just kind of loosen up where I didn't lay the glue down because I don't want it to look like I just stuck it there. I want it to look like it has been accumulating over the years, sitting in the forest. Just gluing it down, pressing it on, then pick them up and shake it off. You don't need to have a lot in there. You just want enough to make it look like it's been growing. So there you have it. Look at how adorably these turned out. I'm so excited. Those backs turned out super precious. Oh my gosh, which side is your favorite, the front or the back? I do love the plaid on the back, but oh my goodness, those fairies, adorable. So guys, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you've not subscribed, I hope you will consider doing so now by hitting that subscribe button. If you want to know when I've uploaded a new video, hit that bell notification and YouTube should notify you when my next video has gone live. As always, guys, stay safe, God bless, and bye for now.